right? So you have that suspended state of consciousness that you can't come out of. You can't awake from. So there's different types, right? If you're just in a light state, then your brain stem and all those spinal cord reflexes are still there. They're still operating. When you're in a deep state, then that's when you have to be on some sort of machine to even keep those functions running. Right, so if you're just in a light state, you don't have to be on any kind of machine. You're in a deeper state, then even those reflexes and centers in the medulla oblongata are gone. So to inactivate this, right, the sleep is suspending this. Right, where sleep is just that partial state where you're suspending consciousness, for a brief period of time. Melatonin is responsible for this, right? So melatonin is connected to your circadian rhythm, which tells you when to go to sleep and when to wake up. When you have under general anesthesia, you're basically turning this off. All that sensory information doesn't make it up.
I have a stupid question. What is suspended animation? What does that mean?
It's consciousness.
That's the same thing?
Did I say animation?
Yeah, suspended animation.
Like
when somebody
animation. No, just it's suspended consciousness. I didn't even know I said animation.
No, I'm asking what does that mean?
I didn't know I said it.
No, you didn't. I was asking.
Oh, I thought I said it.
No, you didn't. I was
asking.
asking.
No, it just means that, so when this is functioning, as part of its function is to keep us aware and alert. And to do that, it needs to have all the sensory information coming in from visual, auditory, but then we can suspend all that, where the sensory information now shuts off. So basically we can give our brain a rest, right? So we just need to suspend all things coming in for 8 hours, right? And there's been like a lot of studies showing that if you don't get, like you can't go without sleep for very long, like it can cause death. Right, so basically suspending all of that to give your brain just time to not do anything. So that's what this is involved in. So in order to suspend it, you need melatonin, right? And that will help to put you into that state of you just suspend that sensory information coming from the thalamus up. It stops. That's sleep. So the difference between sleep and a coma is sleep, there's certain sensory information that will wake you up, right? Everything but olfaction. You can touch, you can press somebody and they'll wake up. You can pinch them, they'll wake up. You can scream at them, they'll wake up. Even like bright light, you can sense that. Smell, you will not. Coma is, it doesn't matter what you do, they will not come out of that state.
Then why do they have like smelling salts if someone
Passes out.
Yeah.
That's different. Passing out is because you've lost blood or your blood pressure drops. Syncope, your blood pressure just drops so much that you pass out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's different. Passing out that's abnormal because you drop your blood pressure.
Okay.
Right. This is a normal. Your RAS isn't suspended then. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you just see the difference?
So
Yes. Yeah.
why did they say some people can
Because
hear
when
things?
you fainted, your RAS was working,
Mm-hmm.
right? Presumably, unless you were sleeping, and that's a different story, right? But if you're just have a sudden drop in your blood pressure and you faint, you were in a normal state of consciousness when that happened. So you're not sleeping. Your body basically had shut down for a second.
Okay, so your RAS was working.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what is it when people say that they can hear things when they're in a coma? Sometimes people say they respond to certain things
Yeah.
when they're in comas, like
Yeah.
the sound of someone's voice or something like that. What is that?
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
I don't know. I don't even know that that's like people who have woken up have said that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you hear sometimes people say it, they're in a coma, but I heard this person talking to me or I responded to somebody's touch.
Well, you can.
Mm-hmm.
You can, and even in sleep, you'll hear people. It'll wake you up. Yeah. So you can.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that won't wake you up is the smell.
Gotcha.
Yeah. You will wake up by
Good
loud
morning.
noises. You'll hear.
My husband
You even
passes
know
gas,
that
I'll
you
smell
might
it.
go to sleep. What?
Said my husband passes gas, I'll smell it.
Well, you weren't sleeping.
No, I wasn't.
Or if that's pain, right?
Yeah, it's painful.
If it's noxious, that's a different reason. That's not an olfactory. That goes straight to a pain.
Don't ever tell him if you ever meet him. I said that.
Okay, so then this is the descending. This just helps with muscle tone and to regulate heart rate, blood pressure, our respiratory rates. Remember, that's just a small function of it. Okay, so that's the brainstem. I like these slides here because it just gives you a summary. Basically takes all those slides we just went through for the medulla oblongata, puts it on one slide. So you have it for that one, for the pons, and for the midbrain. So part of the test is just recognizing words, that go with the part of the brain. Okay, how do you feel about that, the brainstem? Okay, so that's one of 4 parts. Now the cerebellum. So even though this is just 1/10 of the brain in mass, this represents 1/10 of the brain in mass, it receives half of the neurons. Information contains half of all the neurons are in the cerebellum. So it just shows its role in being part of receiving sensory and motor out and producing motor. So the structures, let's see, the tentorium cerebelli, you have to know, that's part of the dura mater, an extension of it, that separates the cerebellum from the cerebrum. So here's the cerebellum, cerebrum, and you can see in this section the tentorium cerebelli. Remember the falx cerebri separates the 2 hemispheres of the cerebrum, and the falx cerebelli separates the 2 hemispheres of the cerebellum. Okay, so cerebellum is posterior. Okay, the cerebellum, so the structures you have to know here is to look, this is looking from the top down. This is looking at the bottom of it. So the biggest structure is the vermis. Vermis means worm. So you can see it both from the inferior view and the superior view. And then there's different lobes. So the anterior lobe, the posterior lobes, and then from the inferior you can see the flocculonodular node. Okay, so just vermis, different lobes, different hemispheres. 2 hemispheres, lobes, vermis. Then the other thing you have to know here is the folia and the arbor vitae. So you can see the white matter is called arbor vitae, and the gray matter is called the folia. And just like the cerebral cortex, it's folded, it has a gyrate, right, for lots of surface area. Okay, in terms of white matter, the peduncles, right, are going to be responsible. Those are axons carrying information about movement. And then you can just see the different parts. Don't worry about this. Okay, just remembering that the cerebellum is responsible for coordinating movement. So the white matter is the arbor vitae. That's going to contain myelinated axons that are either involved in the sensory part of movement or the motor part of movement. The gray matter is on the exterior. It's called folia. That's going to contain the dendrites and cell bodies of either receiving sensory or sending motor, or sending sensory. Okay, and then lastly, this slide, what is its function? Coordinates skeletal muscle movement. So we have tone, posture, balance, and also is responsible for learning skilled movement. So both of those. Ataxia is when you have uncoordinated movement. You stagger. You'll see it in your speech pattern, right? This is what alcohol causes, right? When you slur and you stagger. That's ataxia caused by alcohol. It's because alcohol is affecting the function of the cerebellum. We'll also see it in Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis. Okay, so again, ataxia is just uncoordinated movement. Okay, that's it for the cerebellum, not much, right? Vermis, arbor vitae, folia, movement. Learning skilled movement, having balance, having muscle tone, having our posture. Ataxia, uncoordinated movement. Alright, the diencephalon, 3 areas. Thalamus is the largest structure. It's this big bean in the middle. In the front, you'll see the hypothalamus. That's anterior. It's connected to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is part of the endocrine system. And then if you go to the back, that's the epithalamus. It has the pineal gland in it. Okay, so thalamus in the middle, hypothalamus in the front, epithalamus in the back. And showing other views. So we have the thalamus here. It's mostly gray matter, so a bunch of nuclei. This is showing one of the white matters, right, in the middle. It's called the interthalamic adhesion or the thalamic mass, lots of different names for it. Thalamus, 80% of the diencephalon. That interthalamic adhesion, that little spot we just looked at, that's bridging, it's the axons, carry information between the 2 halves of the thalamus. Okay, so this is just showing all of the nuclei. They're paired on either side. Do not remember any of this. All you have to know is remember thalamus is a relay for sensory and a filter for sensory. So that's why there's so many nuclei. All these second order neurons are coming up to the thalamus. Remember, all second order neurons end here. So that means they're synapsing with one of these nuclei. So that means that the third order neuron is going to begin somewhere in one of these nuclei.
Sorry, you said relay for sensory and what else?
And a filter. So these 5 are just showing the paired nuclei. There's one called the anterior, one called the medial, one called the lateral, ventral, and intralaminar. And I've just written down what they contain in there, but you don't have to remember that. Okay? This is the white matter. There's the capsule. Remember, white matter, axons. And the internal medullary lamina. So not very much white matter, it's mostly nuclei. So this picture is showing wherever you see color, right, that's all except for this. This is the only white matter here. And this white structure. So that's white matter and this is white matter. The rest is all the nuclei. So it's almost all gray matter, which makes sense because that's the end, right? Or that's the relay and filter for sensory, except smell. So it's going to come here. All sensory comes here first, except for smell. How do we feel about that? So thalamus, largest part of the diencephalon. Filters and relays, all sensory except smell. So it's almost all gray nuclei, right? hypothalamus, same thing. All these colored areas are just showing you all the nuclei, right? Because of the functions of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is a major regulator of almost all homeostatic balances that involve the nervous system and the endocrine system, quite frankly. You could say the hypothalamus is really dictates pretty much all homeostatic balances. So it's mostly nuclei. And it's connected through this infundibulum infundibulum, which is just a stalk, to the pituitary gland, which is part of the endocrine system. So again, this is just showing the different nuclei. You do not have to memorize those. Okay, but you do have to know the functions. One, it's the master controller of the autonomic nervous system. And that way, it's basically regulating all the cardiac muscle, modulating it, smooth muscle and glands. It can modulate our heart rate, speed it up or slow it down. It's going to be in control of moving food through our GI tract, defecating, urination, right, controlling the autonomic nervous system. 2, it produces 2 hormones, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. It makes those, they're stored in the posterior pituitary gland, and then it also controls the hormones that are made and released by the anterior pituitary gland. So in essence, you can say it's the master regulator of the endocrine system. So it's a master regulator of the autonomic nervous system and a master regulator of the endocrine system. So in that way, it pretty much controls almost all homeostatic balances. 3, it regulates our emotions and behaviors along with the limbic system. So the limbic system is involved in really evolutionary, ancient behavior patterns like rage and aggression and pain and pleasure. Those are really old emotions. If you think about animals, which we are, right? They basically, these help to live long enough to reproduce. Pain and pleasure, that's how you learn things. Right? You stay away from things that cause you pain, you go to things that cause you pleasure. Okay, that's why ripe fruit is a different color, and it's why fat gives us more pleasure. There's more energy in it, and so it triggers pleasure centers because it says that contains the most energy. And then it controls, it's where our satiety center is. It's where our hunger center is. It tells us when to eat and when to stop eating. Our thirst center, so it releases antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone helps you conserve water. If you're dehydrated, this is released and you conserve all of your water, so you urinate less. This is what alcohol inhibits, antidiuretic hormone. This is breaking the seal. All right, it inhibits this, and so you can't conserve your water. You're urinating all the time, and it's why you have a hangover. You're dehydrated. Okay, it controls our body temperature. It regulates when we sleep. So our circadian rhythm, these are all just proteins that get made and released at a certain time during the day, right? And that's what controls the release of melatonin and our sleeping and waking up, which is just our circadian rhythms. Okay, so 6 functions you have to remember. Controlling autonomic, controlling endocrine, our emotional and behavior with the limbic system, tells us when to eat, when to stop eating, that we need to drink. Controls our body temperature, tells us when to sleep, when to wake up. Okay, last thing is epithalamus. This is where melatonin is secreted from the pineal gland. So the pineal gland secretes the melatonin. The other part of the epithalamus is the abenecular, that's misspelled there, nuclei. And that's involved in the emotions of smelling, right? The memories that come back. So if your grandma made sugar cookies, you know, the idea that when you smell sugar cookies, you think of your grandma. Okay, we have circumventricular organs that surround the diencephalon, right? And they're basically, they don't have a blood-brain barrier. Neither does the hypothalamus, right? So this is where, area where we have chemoreceptors. Basically, chemoreceptors monitor the oxygen content and hydrogen ion content of the cerebrospinal fluid as a way to ensure that the blood that's circulating is enough, right? So it controls the amount of blood that gets to the brain. So if you have a decrease in oxygen or an increase in carbon dioxide, then you're going to increase blood flow to the brain. Okay, so again, summary, diencephalon. These are a good place to start to memorize. And lastly, the cerebrum, which is the 10:30. So since we're going to, we can finish next week. So we'll go with the cerebrum and autonomic nervous system, and then we'll do a review at the end. Maybe a practice test, or we'll just maybe put a bunch of clicker questions up and just go through them.
Next Saturday?
You just got here.
Yeah, you missed it.
We tell you what's going on.
Okay. I was like, wait,